Okay, perfect. So the funny thing about this is I'm actually the moderator. So I have a double kind of function about this. So I don't even have to make a funny introduction or ask for a round of applause. I just have to sit down here and begin to moderate. So how are we for time? Perfect. So 25 minutes and let's go. Okay, thank you all for coming and welcome to the panel. Sarah, you've traveled from Ireland, or where did you travel from to get here?
Yeah, from Ireland.
Okay, very good. And you've traveled from Turkey, Istanbul, Barcelona, and Madrid. Perfect. So maybe you could introduce yourselves quickly, and then we'll start to get into the questions. Sarah.
Okay, so I am Sara Bravo. I work for Salesforce.com. You know, Salesforce is a business platform. So we do CRM, marketing automation, customer service, apps development in the cloud. And for 5 years, I've been handling the department of Salesforce for Venture Capital. This is a commercial department working with venture capital and with venture capital invested companies. So we help them to grow and to scale.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, Dilek, tell me about...
Dilek Dayınlarlı. I'm a venture capitalist, invest in early stage and deep tech startups. Actually, our investor and advisor is the first investor of Salesforce, so we are lucky to be here at the same panel. I'm a Kaufman Fellow, EU Horizon 2020 judge and columnist. I already invested in cyber, genomics, big data, fintech companies. And we just don't invest, we go and help them for scaling, make a lot of research with Harvard and Stanford. I'm also a guest lecturer at Stanford University on the topic.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, Juan? Okay, just wait a second. We haven't got a micro for Juan? Can we just get it? Micro? Okay, is it... Hello? Okay, Juan's micro no funciona. Try it again. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Juan, could you start again? Yeah.
Again.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Well, they couldn't hear you before, so they need to hear you now. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Juan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Finboot. We're a blockchain technology innovation group, mainly focused on sort of moving beyond the hype and start getting blockchain applications and services into the enterprise world. We've been part of the Entrepreneurs Fund of Fundación Repsol for over a year now, and we'll continue working with them for the next year and collaborating with Repsol. Very interesting to see what we're going to be discussing today about challenges that I'm pretty sure we've got ahead of us. So.
Yeah, okay. And finally, Thomas, could you introduce yourself?
Okay, yeah, I'm Thomas Coca. I'm from Fundación Repsol. I'm actually responsible of the selection process of the Entrepreneurs Fund. Our fund basically supports, it's an accelerator which supports projects in energy mobility, okay? And one of those projects was Finboot, which has been with us for 1 year.
Fantastic. Okay, I guess I should introduce myself, even though I was the moderator. I introduced myself at 10 o'clock this morning, so there's probably no one who's been here since 10 o'clock. So I'm Joe Haslam, and I'm a professor in IE Business School, teaching various departments there, everything from global affairs to architecture to the MBA. And my research interest is on scaling. So we have a number of courses on scale-up, and we were in fact the first ever business school to actually deal with scale-up as a specific discipline, as apart from starting up or anything like that. So we've been running a course called the Owner Scale-Up Program for about 5 years now, and we also have various online programs as well. And I've spent, rather than saying originally an entrepreneur, because I guess if you're an entrepreneur, you always were. It's just a question of whether you admit it. But I've started about 6 companies, and I continue to be, one of them we scaled to 250 people and raised 75 million in venture capital, and it gave me a lifelong interest in scaling. You know, if someone gives you basically infinite resources, how do you scale? So I spent about the last 5 years kind of talking to every scale-up founder I possibly could, and you know, debating at conferences and TV shows and everything like that to try and kind of find out how to scale. You know, it's really interesting to see a lot of companies that have scaled, they've made it in spite of having done good practice. In other words, they didn't really have a plan, they just sort of made it work by force. But that's all changing now, and there's a lot more emphasis on scale up and methodology. And there's also, we're living in a time when we're kind of getting to the end of the era of startups. So there's going to be much more interest in scale-ups now because of technologies we're going to talk about in a few moments. You have to get big in a way that wasn't perhaps so necessary before. What Elena was talking about in terms of Amazon, taking over the B2C space before. So really the emphasis is on getting big. If you stay small, you're like a flower in a desert and you'll be pushed over. So what we'd like to do in this panel is just talk really initially about the challenges of scale-up. In other words, what's different to starting versus what's to scale, and what are the kind of things you should be looking for. So maybe, Sarah, we'll start with you. What do you see as the challenges for any company to scale up?
Well, for me, scalability is the ability of a company to handle an exponential growth. So this growth, they need to increase their KPIs and everything. So it's more like, how can a startup start from zero and go from an organic growth, from the friends, founders, and organic internet growth, from a proactive and a predictable growth? How can they build and manage what is supposed to be a sales machine? But it's not only about the sales. Then they also need to keep customer success. They also need to keep customer very happy. So they will be their ambassadors and they will recommend. They will also need to maintain and create shareholder value. Because you have to keep your customers happy, your investors happy, and your employees happy. And then it's all about innovation as well. You need to do something innovative. The companies, they should focus on their own innovation, and then also how can they go of building all this together.
For sure, KPIs is a very important part of it. One of the first things I ask any scaling founder is, what do you track? And most founders try to simplify their business, because the essence of scaling is simplifying your business. I mean, you start, you experiment, you find out what works, you stop doing what doesn't work, and you start doing what does work, and you start to hone in on what's often called the North Star metric, which is the key metric which everyone focuses on to make it scale. So one of the first things I ask, in fact, one company I asked them, how many metrics do you track? And they told me 160. Which was like far too many. So what you need to do is simplification all the time. So maybe same question to you, Jay, what do you see as the challenges of scaling? And what kind of examples in particular did you have?
Because first of all, I want to thank you.
Oh,
because
really?
you are one of the few professors in the world who is really working on this topic. It's so hard
we'll hug
to
later.
find.
Yeah.
So I saw more than 6,000 companies probably and invested in a bunch of them. And when you see so many different companies but going through the same problems, usually I invest in early stage. So it's 10 to 15 people in the team. They think that when they hire new people, and when they get more money, they think it's going to be easier.
Yeah.
But what happens is, when we put the money in, everything goes crazy.
Yeah.
Because I have a metaphor for this. At the beginning, you were in a sandal, which was really small. Everybody saw each other. It was so easy to sync and go to the same place because you hear what everybody else was doing. Yeah. But now you are in a big boat. There are people at the machine downstairs. There are people at the top who is looking what's going on with the wind, for example. Yeah. And you have to be sitting all in the middle and manage all those people. You shouldn't row. So the biggest problem that I see is they still want to be rowing or working on the operations. Yeah. The first problem is the leadership. So how am I going to make them a better leader and recruit right people so they can have a visibility, predict the future, and take good actions? And usually the second one is execution. Yeah. Because at the beginning it was so easy, communication was easy. They didn't have to spend time for it. Now it's literally you have to have priorities, your North Star. You have to have daily, weekly, or quarterly meetings. and like sync the team, bring them all together, and you have to have like a culture. Everybody talks about culture, but it's literally what's going to happen, how the other people are going to decide when you are not there, like creating your own core values, for example. And then obviously strategy. I don't mean in a fancy way. I used to be a management consultant, but you need to know where you are going. It can change along the way how you go to there, but you have to have a big dream that's driving everybody, and of course cash. So what I'm trying to do, like I see these the main problems at scaling, and I help my companies. How can I develop the leaders? How can I bring them more cash? And how can I make them execute it in a better way, actually?
No, I mean, you've covered so much there, and like, I guess as a scale-up researcher, I could talk to you for a considerable amount of time, and perhaps we'll do that later. But yeah, those are sort of the key parts. Culture is obviously tremendously important. When a company is small, everyone gets to know the founder, and the founder transmits their personality, and that works. But how do you transmit your personality in a way that that person then can transmit the personality to the next person? That's the key to culture. And you have to write this down. There's no real, in a startup you're just about surviving, but a scale up you're always about trying to write down a culture so that you know what to do without having to kind of continually ask the founders or someone high up. And the other things you've mentioned, of course, cash. But there is a craziness that enters like after you start to scale that kind of is, in some ways exciting, but it also is completely like after too much excitement, it's almost like a party that can't go on forever. You have to kind of, start to focus on what you're trying to do. So we're going to get back to some of those things you talked about later. So maybe Juan, what are the challenges of scalability for you?
I'm going to get back to one of those things.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Which one?
So you're going to tell us why the blockchain scales, basically.
We'll get to that.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think pulling on a thread of what Dilek said was, I think the change of mentality is definitely a struggle, right? I mean, as entrepreneurs, you start with a vision and you want to get big and you want to get there. But it's absolutely not the same leading a 10-people team than leading a 100, 500, thousands people team, right? So at the beginning, it's quite easy. It's basically everything you said. Like communication goes very smoothly. As you start to grow, you need to make sure that vision that you had at the beginning propagates throughout the team, right? And propagates throughout the company. And ensuring that happens is absolutely quite a challenge, right? That coming from sort of that change of mentality as you scale. When I put my tech hat talking about technology companies, scalability takes a whole other meaning, right? Because of course you need to assure that you've got a high growth business model, but you also need to assure that the technology base upon which that business model is defined can also scale with the same flexibility and the same dynamics. So we need to sort of approach scalability from the business perspective, from the company culture perspective, but we should never forget about the technology perspective, because then you've got this huge number of leads, tremendous KPIs, and once your technology just saturates, they might all go to hell. Yeah,
basically, or where nobody wants to go to. Let's be very clear about that.
That is exactly where we help.
Okay, just maybe let Thomas, and we'll come back to that again. So, Thomas, what are the challenges of scalability for you?
Okay, well, for me, scalability is like a stool of a three-legged stool.
Okay.
Those three legs, basically, in each step of the scale you're going to be moving is always, or practically always the same.
Yeah.
One is the product development. The other one is the financial part, and the other one is the human factor.
Yeah.
The product development, people, especially when they start, they need to think big. They need to think as I'm gonna take this to the industry, or I'm gonna take this to a big client. So I really need to get the product as they want, and with the components and the materials that they want. Okay. If it's a software, it needs to be the user-friendly that the owner is gonna be used to. Okay. So that's important, because people sometimes think that their product is the best, but they're not doing it in a very industrial perspective. So when it comes to be placed on the industry, it just doesn't work, okay?
Yeah.
Because they have missed many, many things. When it comes to the financial part, it is important because obviously if you don't have enough support, it's very hard to scale up, it's very hard to hire people or even to develop that product. And for me, you should have enough cash to actually be able to run those moments when you're going to be on death valley on the change of that scalability. You're gonna scale step by step, but on those steps there's a small death valley which you need to have cash to support that.
Yeah.
So cash for me is important for both human and the development of it. And then the human part. I mean, when you start to grow up, entrepreneurship do everything. As an entrepreneur, you do everything. You are in everything involved. When you get to a small enterprise, you are going to be a leader, and you have a group of people working for you. When you get to a medium enterprise, you're going to be the leader of the leaders, because you're going to have people working for you, which at the same time are going to be the leaders of all the workforce. And when you're a big company, basically you're going to be a satellite. And I know it sounds easy when you say it, but you need to keep that in mind that sometimes you have to back up and especially delegate to the people who are working with you. And that for a person that is actually the owner of the product, that is the person that actually started the product, is really hard to do sometimes.
Yeah. And that's what investors will tell you about. One of the first things investors will ask is the founder capable of taking this company to to basically an IPO, or at least turn it into a unicorn or a company of considerable size. And some founders have been able to do that, and some haven't been. And some people are kind of left as the CEO, but they bring in a very good kind of number two with them, who then is essentially the manager of the company. The other thing, which to highlight what you've said, is that I always say about starting up is about finding out where you're strong. In other words, what possible functionality you can create that you can charge a high price for and compete. Whereas in scale-up, you need to find out where you're weak, because of course, if you are selling like 1,000 products and they don't work properly, it's not a big problem. But if you're selling 1 million problems, and one of the big things that happen is you have premature scaling, whereby companies too quickly believe that they have found what it is that the world cannot live without, and they put great sales and marketing behind it, and then they fill everyone's expectation, and then it doesn't deliver, and they crash. And in some ways, there's no way back from that. So it can take, if you look at one of the things Sarah mentioned was exponentiality, and it's key to understand that growth and scaling is not linear, it's exponential. In other words, it can take you a long time to get to, and like in the case of Airbnb, it took them a long time to get to 5 million nights booked, but it took them 18 months later to get to 10 million. Similarly, it took Facebook, to get to 1 billion people, and it took them almost no time at all to get to 2 billion people. So, it can take you a long time to try and find the formula, but once the formula works, the exponential growth kicks in. So maybe, Sarah, you're probably going to say the best time to talk to Salesforce is day one of your company, but ideally, when should a startup start to come and talk to you guys?
Well, there are two kinds of approach. The first one is a startup that from the very beginning, from the moment zero, they put Salesforce and they choose Salesforce as a business platform, even when they are like 2-3 people on the company. And we have like a program for help them doing that. And then the second option is they start using disconnected and cheap tools. And then they reach a moment where they need more. They have a sales team, a service team, a marketing team, that they realize they don't talk to each other. And that can work when you are 10, when you are 20, when you are 30. But then when you continue scaling, when you are 100 people and you realize that the communication between your sales, your service, and your marketing team is manual, is sending emails, then it's a catastrophe. And then this is the moment a lot of companies, they have this push to do like a digital innovation, and then they put Salesforce unifying everything as a single platform, as a point of with a single customer, so they can have a 360 degrees approach on what the customer needs, who talk with who, if the customer has been contacted by service, by sales, by marketing, so they can have this unified vision. So, I mean, the best will be that they will have started with Salesforce from the beginning, obviously, but usually that kicks in more when they are medium.
One of the things I've noticed a lot is that like the price of technology has come way down. When I started my first company, you were paying like $1 million for an Oracle database, and you were paying, for business reporting and things. So, I think more scale-ups can access technology much more quickly. And also, with the cloud, it makes it much more effective. But you still see a lot of companies waiting before they start to really kind of get their efficient technology together. And of course, if you can do it, you can then get access to reporting. And if you have good numbers, you can make good decisions. Most bad decisions are made due to lack of information rather than anything else. Dilek, one of the things I like is that your firm is actually called Scale, which is, can you talk to me just a bit about that and what that's like to have? Do people recognize the term, or do they kind of say, what does that mean?
They realize it, especially in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But when I first started, to be honest, not that many people talked about it.
Yeah.
It's been talked lately in UK, and now Reid Hoffman is doing Master of Scale, which changed a lot, everything.
Yeah.
Nobody was really talking about it, actually, but it helps me a lot. X helps me a lot, too. I never thought about SpaceX, but like it's scaling and amplified X, so.
Scale X and SpaceX, okay.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's a really tough place. What I see is mostly psychological and managing complexity than anything else. And what I learned, one of my executives told me, you have to learn how to learn, and you have to learn how to unlearn. Because it's a phase that you have to learn a lot of things, set systems, but if you are scaling really fast and exponentially, it has to change in some places, so you have to unlearn. That was the best thing I have heard from an entrepreneur, actually.
I think that's when the value of expertise comes in. I mean, why scale? One of the best reasons for scaling, not just from a financial or an ambition point of view, is that when you scale, you can hire experts. I mean, experts are probably not going to come and join you when you're a small company, but when you can get to a certain size, you can hire an expert. And anyone who's ever worked with an expert knows what that's like, knows the beauty of working with someone who can spot something immediately, knows what to do before anything gets to be a problem. And that's really, the reason for scaling, and that's the reason for having the ambition to take on more capital and to try and push aggressively. Because when you can hire experts, it suddenly becomes, as a founder, you move away from like daily firefighting, and you start to be able to sort of look strategically at things. Because as a startup founder, you have to just take the money where it comes from. But when you start to scale, you get into this area whereby you can distinguish between what's called good growth and bad growth. I've often described just like cholesterol, you can have good cholesterol and you can have bad cholesterol. Well, you can have good growth and bad growth. In other words, you can have growth that's increasing your revenue and increasing, but it's not actually increasing your bottom line. So you have to try and move away from the so-called bad growth, and try and move towards the good growth. And that's a sort of a key unblocking thing that happens when you scale. So you can get kind of from the, and what Thomas was saying about you have this kind of stuttery moment. Very often you find after taking a round of finance, you have a stuttery moment when you try and kind of fix all the stuff that you kind of knew you had to fix but didn't have time to get to. So, but that's a key point. Separating the good growth from the bad growth and trying prioritizing on, where your margins are, and that's really a key part to scaling up.
There's a number for that area too.
Yeah.
In a software as a service model, actually, not in all the tech. But if you are making more than $1 million till 10 million, you have to fix that. Yeah. Like, you have to bring in that infrastructure and scaling capability, because after 10 million, hopefully you are exponentially grow. So that area is really critical.
Yeah. No, you need to, and everyone wants to go faster. I mean, SaaS is like almost the perfect scaling thing. It's almost like a science experiment. It isn't like when you have products you need to fix and stuff. I have a whiskey company, and it's kind of like it's a whole different kind of a thing. But SaaS is almost a purely scientific.
Yes.
You almost, and it's a very, and that's why a lot of the companies that have scaled have been SaaS companies. And of course the danger is anything that scales really fast can collapse really fast. It's like leverage in finance. Something can get very big and then get very small. I think while you're here, and since your area is the blockchain, I guess spin the web of why blockchain is wonderful to us, and I'll try and smile all the way through it. But why should we all be using blockchain for everything in our lives?
Well, I think you shouldn't be using blockchain for everything in your life today, but rest assured that you will be using blockchain for everything in your life in the future, right? I think the way the technology is designed is just fundamentally changes the way we interact, and it enhances operations in general. It enhances the way we communicate, it enhances the way we check for information, it enhances the way we transact. We need to mature the technology, and we need to bring it to a point where scalability is possible.
But where's the inherently scalable component in the blockchain?
Well, here we come back to what I was saying, it's technology-wise, right? Yeah. So one of the main issues with public blockchains is scalability, right? If we want to change the way we transact with each other, we can't bring it up to times that takes us minutes to do so, right? So we need to keep the same times that we have today. So in public blockchains, this is a big challenge. If we translate the protocol, the technology, to the consortium and enterprise blockchain, we can solve this scalability issue quite easily if we develop the technology in a smart way, or if we design our technology and our products in a way that we can solve scalability, but we don't sacrifice any of the features of the technology.
Okay. Thomas, just from the point of view of Repsol and looking at companies, are you specifically looking for scalability, and what kind of things are you looking for?
I don't know if we're looking for scalability, but we work that scalability, okay? The scalability is something that we come with the company, and obviously if the company wants to do it, we are not going to force that, okay? Yeah. But usually every company wants to grow. So basically what we work is for the company to have strategy, a really well-defined strategy. We always try to get them to work, for example, in the workforce of the company. How do you see yourself and your team in 2 years, in 5 years, and 10 years? So you already know what's the profile of people that you will need in the future. So once that time comes, or even a little bit before, you really know who you need to contract. So we work that out as well. So people actually start to think a little bit more in a future case, and they actually have to work that out, and it's hard for them as well. The other thing we really try to as well teach them is that it's important to have discipline, because otherwise people will end up doing whatever they want, and you have no control of what your company is doing. And try to get all the work and the human factor, as we talked, in procedures. People really need to know what is their role in the company. If you define the role of the person, they know where are the end and the beginning
discipline
of the
and focus.
roles.
You sound like my father, Discipline and focus all the time.
No, that's what we do. We are dads of these people, and we try to help them out to actually grow up and get a good deal in the future.
Okay, very good. Okay, we're in the last 5 minutes now, so we just have the final comment from each of you. So what would be your final words then to the audience in the area of scalability? What do you see happening, I guess, in the future, and what's the key thing anybody needs to know about scalability? Who wants to take that first?
I'll
Okay,
start.
Thomas?
All I have to say is be prepared, because it will happen.
Yeah.
And take the step forward, because it's good. It's a good thing that you actually scale up.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a good thing. Okay, maybe, yeah, go take it ahead.
I think it's very important to build a network that will allow you to scale. And I think I'll take the opportunity of the people I'm sharing this panel with.
Yeah.
I think the Fundación Repsol, Salesforce, and ScaleX are three different types of organizations that can actually be part of that network and take the company in that funnel of scalability.
Like a scale-up ecosystem or something. We're the scale-up movement, you know, yeah. There is actually, there's a professor, Daniel Eisenberg, that talks all the time about the scale-up movement. You know, we have to join the scale-up movement. And I say that at the end of my courses. I always talk about, you now are like, you're part of the scale-up movement. So go out into the world and scale up. Okay, Dilek, your kind of final message, really? What are the things that people need to know?
Lately, I'm really into how the brain works, which fascinates me. Which I told you before, learn how to learn and learn how to unlearn. I think my best thing that I learned in my career is like having an amazing 5 people at least as an advisor, friend, whatever, who knows how to scale. I don't mean just scaling, who knows maybe pricing, maybe business modeling, and keep them close to you because you are gonna learn from them. So, and I think the best way to learn, getting it from the best people around you. You don't have to make them work in your company, but you have to learn from them.
Yeah, get close to them. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. Everyone should have like a mentor or somebody who they can learn from. Final thoughts, Sarah? What are the key messages you want to transmit?
Well, I really agree with everything you said before.
Yeah.
I think it's like we are building a machine.
Okay.
And it is very important to have all the numbers or all the data that you need to control this. And also, what is that like? Be ready to escalate and be ready to set up all the process in place for that.
Sure.
And use Salesforce, maybe.
Oh yeah, of course.
Or CRM.
Okay, I'm going to shamelessly use the last 2 minutes to promote my own thing. So those of you that find scaling interesting in IE Business School, we have a number of courses. We have the Owner Scale Up program, which is a 2-week program where you deal with other founders who are scaling, and they really learn as much from each other as they do from the professors. Most founders who are scaling don't have in contact with other founders, and they don't understand the challenges. So we have a small group of about 15 people, and we run that program, and it works very well. We also have a High Up, which is an online-only scale-up program, whereby, unbelievably enough, you sign up for a 5-minute video message from me every day. So you wake up in the morning and you get your coffee and you're told to scale up point every day, which seems like a crazy format, but it actually works really well. I'm not that scary when I'm inside in a machine rather than in real life. So we have an online program, and you can go to the IE stand and talk to them. It's called a high impact online program, or a High Up. And that is a program you can access for scaling. And we also obviously teach Scale Up in the MBA. I have a course. If there's any IE students, you should take my electives. And we have a joint venture with American University in Beirut for doing Scale Up in the Middle East. Some books that you could mention, we've mentioned Blitz Scaling, which is a book by Reid Hoffman, which is just coming out, which is a really good book. There's also a guy called Eli Al-Gid, who has just published a fantastic called High Growth, and that's just come out. Sorry?
I just got the book, and it's an amazing book.
Yeah. So this is another excellent book. There's another wonderful book. It's called Scale by a professor called Jeffrey West. And what Jeffrey West talks about, he's in the Santa Fe Institute, is the relationship in nature between different things that scale. So like, why do you have an elephant that's very big, and why do you have a mosquito that's very small? And the difference in their molecular structures. And it turns out that in life as in nature, complexity kills. So anytime you have complexity, you don't scale. And anytime you have simplicity, you do scale. So your job as a founder is to eliminate complexity. And you know, there's people I speak to as in a coaching or in a teaching capacity, and literally the question I ask them all day, every day is, what have you done today to eliminate complexity? And that's what happens. That's why, you know, companies that have scaled like Ryanair, you know, they eliminate complexity and keep things very, very simple. So those would be my messages. Today might be the first time that you've heard the word scale up, but all startups, if they are survive, have to become scale ups. So familiarize yourself with the word, read some books on the topic, and talk to companies that have scaled. You know, even there mightn't be a kind of a playbook that you can do that can work every time, but there are about 20 to 30 principles that hold across all scaling organizations. And as I've said to founders, you know, we can tell you what not to do. We can absolutely tell you there are things you should absolutely not do, kinds of people you shouldn't hire, technologies you shouldn't use. Now, can we tell you the things that you need to do to make you a success? Unfortunately, no, you have to work out. But at least if we stop you from making bad mistakes, that's a journey on the way. So let me close just by thanking Sarah, by thanking Dilek, by thanking Juan, thanking Tomas, and I hope you found the panel interesting. Thanks very much, and I'm around all day if anyone else wants to talk to me. Okay, thanks guys.